The smell of disinfectant and regret is the first thing I remember about my 75th birthday. It was supposed to be a surprise. My son, Tyler, and his wife, Nancy, had told me they were taking me out for a special birthday lunch, just a little something to celebrate you, Mom. Tyler had said, his voice a smooth, reassuring melody. I had put on my favorite dress, a soft blue floral I had worn to my own anniversary party, just a few years before my husband Frank passed. I had felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The surprise was a place called Silver Creek Meadows, a senior living community with beige walls, plastic flowers, and the quiet, desperate cheerfulness of a place where people come to be forgotten. They walked me in, sat me down in a vinyl armchair in the lobby, and then, with a final hollow hug, they left. It's just for a little while, Mom, Nancy had cooed, her eyes not quite meeting mine, just until you get your strength back. Then they were gone. They left me there, on my 75th birthday, in a nursing home I had never seen before, with a small overnight bag they had packed for me in secret. They thought they had disposed of their problem, the burden of a grieving, aging mother. They thought my silence was senility, my sadness a sign of incompetence. They didn't know that in that moment of absolute betrayal, as I sat in that sterile, beige room, the woman they thought they knew died, and in her place, a new woman was born, one forged in the fires of righteous anger, with a mind as sharp as a shard of glass, and a memory that was suddenly terrifyingly clear. They sent me to a nursing home. On my birthday, they were about to find out I was rewriting my will and selling the family home right out from under them. It all started, as these slow-motion devastations so often do, with an act of love born from a place of profound loss. When Frank died, the silence in our sprawling Cincinnati house became a living entity. It was a constant, heavy companion that followed me from room to room, a suffocating blanket of grief. I was adrift in an ocean of loneliness, and the echoes of my life with him were a constant, painful reminder of everything I had lost. Tyler and Nancy, married for just over a year, were living in a cramped downtown apartment, perpetually complaining about the rent, their student loans, the general injustice of their starter life. My mother's heart, still foolishly programmed to nurture and to fix, saw a solution that I believed would save us all. I would have company, the sound of life, to fill the dreadful quiet. They would have a beautiful, spacious home, rent-free, a chance to get on their feet. I remember the day I offered it to them, my voice full of a hope that now tastes like ashes in my mouth. "Why don't you move in with me?" I'd said one Sunday over coffee. "There's so much space here. You could save money, get on your feet, and I wouldn't be so alone." Nancy's eyes had lit up, a flicker of something I mistook for daughterly affection, but now recognized as pure opportunism. "Oh, Mom," she'd cooed. "We couldn't possibly impose." Tyler, with his smooth, practiced charm, had sealed the deal. "Margaret, you're a saint. We'll take such good care of you. You've done so much for us. Now it's our turn to look after you." I swallowed their promises like a starving woman. I believed them, because I needed to. I needed the noise, the life, the feeling of a mother again. I helped them move their boxes in, clearing out Frank's old office to make space for their things. I didn't realize I was not just making room for their furniture. I was beginning the slow, painful process of my own erasure. I was a willing participant in the dismantling of my own life, naively believing I was building a new one for us all. The colonization of my home began subtly, with 1,000 small cuts to my identity, each one disguised as an improvement. The first thing to go was Frank's recliner, the worn leather chair where he had read the paper every morning for 30 years. "It's just so bulky and dated, Mom," Tyler had said, his voice laced with a gentle pity that was more insulting than outright disdain. "We found a much more modern piece that will really open up the living room." The modern piece was a cold, angular sofa that was impossible to get comfortable on. I didn't say anything. I watched the delivery men haul away Frank's chair, a piece of my heart going with it. Next it was the wall, the family photos that lined the hallway, generations of memories, from my wedding day to Tyler's first steps, were taken down one by one. We're going for a more minimalist aesthetic, Nancy explained, as she replaced a cherished photo of Frank and me with a generic mass-produced print of a fern. My history was being curated out of existence, deemed too cluttered for their new streamlined life. My kitchen, once my undisputed domain, became a battleground. The recipes I had perfected over a lifetime, the dishes Tyler had begged for as a child, were now met with polite disgust. My meatloaf was too heavy, my fried chicken was too greasy. They embarked on a series of trendy, expensive diets, filling my refrigerator with strange green juices and foods I couldn't pronounce. The comforting aromas of my home were replaced by the smell of steamed kale and simmering resentment. I tried to push back, to hold my ground on the small things. I like my curtains, Nancy, I'd say softly. They were a gift from my grandmother. I know, Mom. And they're lovely, she would reply, her tone making it clear they were anything but they just don't go with the new color palette. We have to think about the overall look of the house. The house, not my house, the house. The language was shifting, and with it the balance of power. Every suggestion I made was met with a patient, weary sigh. Every preference I expressed was treated as a stubborn refusal to get with the time. They were experts at making me feel like the difficult one, the one who was stuck in the past, the one who was preventing our new family from gelling. I was being gaslit in my own living room, made to feel unreasonable for wanting to see my own life reflected in the home I had spent my life creating. The injustice of it was a constant, low-grade fever. I would retreat to my bedroom, the last bastion of my former life, and listen to the sounds of them rearranging my world, without my consent. I told myself I was being too sensitive. I told myself this was the compromise required to have family around, but the loneliness I had so desperately tried to escape was creeping back in, and this new version was far more insidious. It was the loneliness of being invisible, of being a ghost in the vibrant, modern home my house was becoming. The assault on my emotional space was quickly followed by a strategic and devastating takeover of my financial independence. It was a masterclass in manipulation, performed with the loving concern of devoted children. They sat me down at the new glass dining table, the one that always had smudges on it, and presented a stack of my own bills with grave expressions. Mom, we were just going through these, and we're worried, Tyler began, his voice a perfect symphony of sincerity and concern. You have so much to keep track of. The mortgage, the utilities, your insurance. It's a lot for one person to handle. Nancy placed her hand on my arm, her touch cool and proprietary. We just want to make life easier for you, she said. What if we consolidated everything? We could open a joint account, and we can manage all the household payments from there. Your pension can be direct deposited, and you'll never have to worry about missing a due date again. My heart sank. Frank had set me up so carefully, ensuring I would be independent and secure for the rest of my days. My finances were my last vestige of my autonomy, the one part of my life they hadn't yet touched. I'm perfectly capable of paying my own bills, I said, a defensive edge to my voice that I instantly regretted. Oh, we know you are, Margaret. Tyler soothed, his tone placating. This isn't about you not being capable. It's about us taking on some of the burden. It's what families do. We want to take care of you. They used my love for them, my desire for a harmonious family, as a lever to pry open my life. To refuse their help would be to accuse them of something nefarious. To admit that I didn't trust them, it would shatter the fragile peace. And so, worn down and wanting to believe in the best version of my son, I agreed. The next day at the bank, Tyler did all the talking. He charmed the teller with a story about helping his aging mother with her estate plan. I signed the forms, my hand unsteady, adding both their names to my checking and savings accounts, and just like that, they had the keys to the kingdom. For the first month, they were meticulous. The bills were paid on time, but then the bank statement started to tell a different story. There were charges from expensive downtown restaurants, online shopping sprees for clothes and Nancy's size, a weekend getaway to a spa in Chicago that I certainly wasn't invited on. The withdrawals were disguised as household expenses or family needs. But I wasn't a fool. I knew my money was funding their increasingly lavish lifestyle. I tried to confront them, my voice shaking as I held up a statement showing a withdrawal of several $1,000s for home improvements. It had paid for the giant wall-mounted television they now watched every night. "Tyler, what is this?" I asked. "We didn't discuss this. It's an investment in the property, Mom," he said, not even looking away from the screen. "It increases the value for all of us." The audacity of it left me speechless. My savings, the money Frank and I had scrimped and saved, was being used to improve a house they were living in for free, and I was being told it was for my benefit. I was no longer a person, I was a resource. I was the silent, involuntary financier of a life from which I was being systematically excluded. I was paying for the very decor that was erasing me, funding the very lifestyle that was marginalizing me. The injustice of it all settled deep in my bones, a cold, heavy stone of resentment that I was forced to carry in silence. My world, which had once been filled with friends, hobbies, and community, had shrunk to the size of the chair in my bedroom. The isolation tactics that Nancy and Tyler had employed became more brazen, more cruel. They no longer bothered with flimsy excuses. They simply cut me off. The house phone, which I now realized they had set up to forward to Nancy's cell when they were out, rarely rang for me anymore. On the rare occasion a friend did manage to get through directly, Nancy would often hover nearby, making it impossible to have a private or honest conversation. My best friend Monica was the most persistent. She knew something was wrong. She started showing up at the house unannounced, trying to bypass the gatekeepers. The first time she did it, Tyler answered the door. I was in the kitchen, and heard his smooth, practiced voice. "Monica, so good to see you. I'm so sorry Margaret is right in the middle of a nap. She's been so exhausted lately." I was wide awake, holding a cup of tea, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to run to the door and scream that I was a prisoner, but the shame held me in place. What would I even say? How could I explain that my own son was holding me captive? It sounded like the plot of a lurid television movie. Monica tried again, a week later. This time, Nancy answered. Her approach was different, more insidious. "Oh, Monica, hi," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Mom's just having a bit of a confused day. Her memory, you know. The doctor said it's best to keep her environment calm and not have too many visitors. It agitates her." I stood at the top of the stairs, listening in horror. She was painting me as a senile old woman, incompetent and fragile. It was a lie designed not only to keep Monica away, but also to plant a seed of doubt, to discredit me in case I ever did manage to cry for help. The lie was a masterpiece of cruelty. It simultaneously isolated me and destroyed my credibility in a single stroke. After that incident, Monica's visits stopped. I couldn't blame her. She was trying to respect what she believed were my medical needs, manipulated into compliance by my own child. The loneliness became a physical ache, a constant companion. I had invited my family in to fill the silence left by Frank, but they had replaced it with a different kind of silence, a cold, menacing quiet, filled with unspoken threats, and the constant hum of their disregard for me. I was completely at their mercy, and they showed no. My days fell into a bleak, monotonous routine. I would stay in my room until I heard them leave for the day, then creep out to the kitchen to make myself some toast and tea. I would spend the day tidying up the house, washing their dirty dishes left in the sink, folding their laundry left in the dryer. I did it partly out of a lifetime of habit, and partly out of a desperate, pathetic need to feel useful, to somehow earn my keep in the home that was supposed to be mine. They treated me like an unpaid, invisible maid. They would walk past me without a word of greeting. They would discuss their plans for the weekend in front of me, as if I wasn't there. I was no longer Margaret, their mother. I was a fixture, a piece of furniture that occasionally moved and breathed. The injustice was a slow-burning fire in my gut. I had given them everything: my home, my financial security, my love. In return, they had stripped me of my friends, my dignity, and my identity. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own creation, haunted by the ghost of the loving son I thought I had raised. The final act of their betrayal was executed with a chilling efficiency that still makes my blood run cold. It was my 75th birthday. For weeks they had been whispering about a special surprise they had planned for me. "You're going to love it, Mom," Tyler had said, a strange, unreadable glint in his eye. "It's a chance for you to really relax and be taken care of." I had allowed myself a small, fragile sliver of hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the turning point. Maybe this was their way of making up for the past year of cruelty and neglect. Maybe they were finally going to show me the love and appreciation I so desperately craved. On the morning of my birthday, I woke with a sense of nervous anticipation. Nancy came into my room with a small, neatly packed overnight bag. "Here you go, Mom," she said, with a bright, false smile. "Everything you'll need for your little getaway." "A getaway?" I asked, confused. "Where are we going?" "It's a surprise," Tyler said, appearing in the doorway. "Just a nice little place for you to rest and recuperate. We're going to take you to a special birthday lunch on the way." I should have known then. The pre-packed bag, the vague, evasive answers, it all felt wrong. But I was so starved for a scrap of their affection that I ignored the screaming alarms in my own soul. I put on my favorite dress, a soft blue floral that Frank had always loved, and I let them lead me to their new expensive SUV, the one my money had bought. We drove for nearly an hour, out of the city and into the suburbs. We didn't stop for lunch. We pulled into the circular driveway of a large, imposing brick building with a sign out front that read, "Silver Creek Meadows, Senior Living." My heart stopped. "What is this?" I whispered, turning to my son, my face a mask of dawning horror. "It's your surprise, Mom," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "It's a place where you can be safe, where you can have round-the-clock care. We just can't give you what you need at home anymore." "What I need?" I cried, the tears finally coming. "You don't treat your mother like this. I don't need this. I need my home. I need my family." Nancy turned around from the front seat, her face a mask of cold, serene pity. "Margaret," she said, her voice like ice, "you've been confused lately. You're a danger to yourself. This is what's best. We've already signed the papers. It's just for a short-term respite stay, for observation." I knew it was a lie. I saw the finality in their eyes. This was not a short-term stay. This was They walked me inside, my arms held firmly on either side by my son and his wife, my captors. They led me to a small, sterile room, with beige walls, and a single sad window that looked out onto a concrete courtyard. A nurse, with a practiced, professional smile, was waiting for us. "Happy birthday, Margaret," Nancy said, giving me a quick, cold hug that felt like a betrayal. Tyler patted my shoulder, a gesture devoid of all warmth. "We'll be back to visit soon," he lied, and then they turned, and they walked away. They left me there, on my 75th birthday, in a nursing home, with nothing but a small bag of clothes they had packed for me, and a heart that had been shattered into a million irreparable pieces. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully disposed of their burden. They had no idea that they had just locked a queen in a tower with a telephone, a lawyer's number memorized, and a burning, unquenchable desire for justice. The first 24 hours at Silver Creek Meadows were a living hell. I was a prisoner in a beige, antiseptic world, surrounded by the ghosts of other people's forgotten parents. The air was thick with the smell of disinfectant, and I was subjected to a series of humiliating intake procedures, poked, prodded, and questioned by a team of nurses and social workers, who looked at me with a mixture of professional pity and clinical detachment. They asked me my name, the date, the name of the current president. They were testing my cognitive function, trying to find the confusion that my children had so conveniently reported. I answered their questions with a cold, precise clarity that seemed to disappoint them. I was not confused. I was furious. My room was a small, sterile box, with a bed, a dresser, and a single, vinyl armchair. There were no pictures on the walls, no books on the shelves, no trace of the life I had lived. I was a non-person in a non-place. That night, I did not sleep. I sat in the dark, listening to the sounds of the institution, the distant beep of a monitor, the soft shuffle of a nurse's shoes in the hallway, the low moan of a resident down the hall, and I played. The rage that had been ignited by my son's betrayal had now banked into a cold, hard, and utterly focused resolve. They had underestimated me. They had mistaken my grief for senility, my quietness for weakness. They were about to learn that a woman with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous and creative creature on God's green earth. The next morning, I demanded to use the phone. The head nurse, a stern woman with a tight bun and no-nonsense eyes, was reluctant. "Your son said it was best if you didn't get overstimulated," she said. "I am a 75-year-old woman, not a child," I replied, my voice a low, dangerous whisper that surprised even myself. "And I have the right to make a phone call. Get me a phone, or I will start screaming. And trust me, you do not want to see me overstimulated." She must have seen something in my eyes, a flicker of the fire that was now burning in my soul, because she relented. She led me to a small office and handed me a phone. I had only one person to call. "Monica," I said, when my best friend answered. "It's Margaret. They put me in a home." There was a moment of stunned silence, followed by a low, guttural sound of pure rage. "Where are you?" she hissed. "I'm coming to get you." "Not yet," I said, my mind now working with a chilling clarity. "First, I need you to call a lawyer, the best one you can find. Tell them it's an emergency. Tell them it's a case of elder abuse, illegal confinement, and massive financial fraud." While Monica went to work on the outside, I began my campaign on the inside. I started talking to the other residents, to the nurses, to the orderlies. I was no longer the quiet, withdrawn woman who had arrived the day before. I was a woman on a mission. I learned that many of the residents were just like me, dumped here by families who no longer wanted to be bothered. Their stories were a heartbreaking chorus of neglect and betrayal, and I realized that my fight was not just for myself, it was for all of them. I started documenting everything. I got a small notebook and a pen from the activities director, and I wrote down every detail of my confinement, every condescending remark from a nurse, every refused request. I was building a case, a fortress of facts, that would be unassailable. They thought they had put me in a prison. They had no idea they had just given me an army. Monica worked with a speed and efficiency that was breathtaking. The lawyer she hired, a formidable woman named Ms. Albright, who specialized in elder law, was our first conference call, conducted from the small stuffy office at Silver Creek Meadows with a nurse listening in, was a masterpiece of legal strategy. I told Ms. Albright everything, my voice calm and clear as I detailed the years of emotional and financial abuse, the isolation, and the final brutal act of my abandonment. When I mentioned that the deed to my Cincinnati house was still solely in my name, a fact they had somehow overlooked in their greedy haste, there was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "They are fools, Margaret," Ms. Albright said, a note of grim satisfaction in her voice. "They are arrogant, greedy fools, and that is going to be their undoing. They thought by putting you in here, they had all the time in the world to liquidate your estate. They never imagined you'd fight back this quickly. They've made a fatal mistake. The legal assault Ms. Albright launched was a thing of beauty. It was a multi-pronged attack designed for maximum devastation. First, she filed an emergency petition for my immediate release from Silver Creek Meadows, citing illegal confinement, and providing a sworn affidavit from my primary care physician, who confirmed that I was in sound mental and physical health, and had no need for institutional care. The administration at Silver Creek Meadows, faced with the threat of a massive lawsuit, capitulated immediately. I walked out of that place 3 days after I had arrived, not as a defeated old woman, but as a victorious plaintiff, with Monica waiting for me at the curb, a triumphant smile on her face. The second phase of the plan was the financial decapitation. With the power of attorney I had signed from Ms. Albright, she was able to freeze every single one of my original accounts. We opened a new, secure account at a different bank, and had my pension and Social Security checks redirected. Their access to the river of my money that had funded their respectable life was cut off, instantly and completely. The third, and most satisfying phase, was the lawsuit. Ms. Albright filed a comprehensive civil suit against Tyler and Nancy, charging them with financial exploitation of the elderly, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The lawsuit was a work of art, a detailed, damning account of their betrayal. It included copies of the bank statements, my meticulous notes, and sworn affidavits from Monica and several other friends who Nancy had lied to. And then, there was the house. An eviction is messy, Ms. Albright had advised. We are going to do something much cleaner. We are going to sell the house. We hired a discreet real estate agent who marketed the property as a pocket listing. He presented himself to Tyler and Nancy as an appraiser from the bank, sent to evaluate the property for a home equity line of credit. They, completely oblivious and likely desperate for cash now that their primary funding source had dried up, let him in. They proudly gave him a tour of the home they thought was theirs, pointing out all the valuable improvements they had made. They were unwittingly acting as sales agents for their own downfall. The offer came from a young family, who loved the house's solid bones and large yard. The closing was scheduled in 2 weeks until my son and his wife would learn that the roof over their heads no longer belonged to them. They had put me in a home on my birthday. I was about to give them a housewarming gift they would never forget. The legal battle was short and brutal. Their high-priced lawyers were no match for the mountain of evidence I had compiled, the signed documents, the bank statements, the sworn affidavits. It was an open and shut case. Faced with the threat of criminal charges for fraud and exploitation, Tyler and Nancy said they agreed to repay every cent they had stolen, a debt that would follow them for the rest of their lives. They were left with nothing. As for me, I took the proceeds from the sale of the house and the settlement from the lawsuit, and I did something that brought me a peace far greater than any revenge. I bought a small, beautiful condominium in a quiet complex with a community garden and a library. It wasn't the large house of my past, but it was a home, and every inch of it was mine. I filled it with my things, my memories, my life. The floral curtains my grandmother had made hung proudly in the dining room. The photos of Frank and my family were back on the mantelpiece. The house smelled of meatloaf and fresh-baked bread. It smelled like home. But my greatest act of reclamation, my true legacy, was what I did with the rest of the money. I worked with Ms. Albright to establish a foundation. We called it the Birthday Fund, and it provides emergency grants, legal aid, and advocacy for elderly individuals who have been victims of familial abuse and unjust institutionalization. My son's cruelest act, his most profound betrayal, had become my life's most meaningful work. I had turned my pain into a shield for others. I had taken the ugliest day of my life and transformed it into a beacon of hope. I was no longer just a survivor. I was a warrior, fighting for all the other forgotten parents, the other burdens, the other quiet souls, who had been silenced by the people who were supposed to love them most. I sit on my new balcony now, a cup of coffee warming my hands, and I watch the sun rise over Cincinnati. The air is cool and clean, and the quiet is a comforting blanket, not a suffocating shroud. My life is small and beautiful, curated not by my son's aesthetic, but by my own sense of peace. I don't think about Tyler and Nancy often. The anger has long since faded, replaced by a kind of weary, distant pity. They were so consumed by their own greed, so desperate for a life they felt they were owed, that they destroyed the one person who had ever truly loved them. It is a tragedy of their own making, and they will have to live with the consequences for the rest of their lives. A few months ago I received a letter, forwarded from Monica. The handwriting was Tyler's, a shaky, looping scrawl. It was a long, rambling letter, filled not with apology, but with a litany of his own hardships. Nancy had left him. He was struggling to find work. His life was a mess. It ended with a single stunning sentence. After everything, I think you owe it to me to help. I read the letter, and then I did something the old Margaret would never have done. I laughed, a real, deep, genuine laugh. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it was almost impressive. I took the letter, walked over to the paper shredder Monica had given me as a housewarming gift, and I fed it into the machine. I watched as his words, his entitlement, his complete lack of self-awareness, were turned into a meaningless confetti of paper. My help, my love, my resources, they were no longer his to claim. I had found new places to invest my heart. I had found myself. My story is not one of revenge, not really. It is a story of reclamation. It is the story of a woman who was sent to a home to be forgotten, and remembered that she was the one who had built the home in the first place. It is a story about the quiet, unshakable power that comes from knowing your own worth, even when those closest to you have forgotten it. I am not a victim, I am a survivor, and as I watch the morning light spill across my garden, I am filled with a profound and lasting peace. They gave me a birthday present I will never forget, and in return, I gave them a lesson in consequences that will last them a life.